Almost nothing better in the spring than spring football or a spring football preview, especially when you've got Steve Helwagen and Tony Gerdeman here to deliver. Gets no better than that here for our 101st edition Ohio State Buckeyes Live. Kevin Noon will not be joining us, so we will see if Tony and Steve can make it through because we knew that Kevin was carrying us all those months. How are you guys doing today with that intro?
Worried.
Yeah. Concerned, laughing a little bit. Yeah.
All right. So we got, noon Eastern time at the shoe with about 20,000 faithful allowed to enter the gates and check out Ohio State in the latest edition that we will see on the field in 2021. All right, Steve, we're going to tee it off with you. And I know since you guys have seen every rep of practice that you should have a full rundown and scouting report of these quarterbacks for sure. And especially since you've been able to, you have not been able to talk to them. We just found out from Tony. My goodness.
Well,
and you guys are always, as I get to see each and every week, you guys are expected to have all the answers and all the insight into everything, which because that's your jobs. But it's kind of difficult the way things stand right now in terms of the media connection to the team.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You know, you think about spring football is really about fundamentals and development, and people misconstrue this as game planning and covert activity that needs to be hidden from the opponents when everybody is basically doing the same drills and the same fundamentals to try and get ready for the fall. I mean, there is a little bit of 11-on-11 stuff, but primarily it's all about individual for the most part. So, it is what it is. And it's kind of changed over the years. When I was a young guy on this beat, you could go to probably 10 of the 15 practices. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time. 10 of the 15 practices, and it was almost to the point where you were hoping they would disinvite you so you wouldn't have to go to all the trouble of schlepping down there for practice. But otherwise, now we got to watch about 30 minutes of 3 different practice sessions. And, of course, then the spring game coming up on Saturday. I don't suppose they're going to show us a whole heck of a lot during the course of the spring game, but they will get some live reps going with those quarterbacks and wide receivers and the offensive line and so on. So I am interested to see how this all shakes out. It appears it's still a 3-man race at quarterback with C.J. Stroud, Jack Miller, and Kyle McCord. From what we could tell, basically splitting all the reps evenly during the drill work, at least that we saw. Maybe that's not the case in the scrimmage situations. It's hard to say, but we put a video out there and a comment that Julian Fleming was running with the 3s, and he was one of the top wide receivers in the country last year. People were like, he is, quote, buried on the depth chart, probably going to transfer, saying stupid stuff like that. And I have to come back with, well, first of all, who's he playing behind? 6 pretty good players. Secondly, they readily admit that they change these guys within each group every day to give guys different amounts of reps and with different groups every day. And so it's just a snapshot. 1 30-minute segment out of 20 hours, or rather 30 hours of spring football isn't going to give you the full picture. There could be a day, this week where he's working with the 1s instead of the 3s. You just don't know. So, again, don't read too much into it. Don't get too wrapped around the axle, but plenty to take a look at this Saturday, I think.
Yeah, and keep in mind, guys have little various injuries and dings that they're dealing with that moves them up and down the depth chart. And, I wrote in my weekly chat today that I think so far, like C.J. Stroud has maybe thrown the worst of the balls that I've seen this spring. But keep in mind, I've seen about 20 total passes. So make no judgments based on anything I've seen on the quarterbacks because we haven't really gotten to see much. And, you try to extrapolate that, but it's such a small sample. And as Ryan Day says, these guys aren't trying to win it each day. They're just trying to continue to move forward. And then, you try to decipher what they show us, and they're only going to show us the good stuff. But when they are showing us the good stuff, that means something bad is happening to the other side of the ball. So there is still that, but we'll just, as we talked about, Mark, last week, don't make too much of what happens with the quarterbacks in this spring game, because we can go right back to Justin Fields last year, 4 for 13 for 131 yards and a touchdown, and the one touchdown went for 98 yards. So other than that, he was 3 for 12, and so I expect more passing yards from the guys this week, and it's just always interesting to me when you'll see somebody base their entire premise of how the quarterback situation is based, well, Joe Burrow threw for 180 yards in the spring game and he looked really good. And it's like, well, that's fine, but this is one of 40 practices, and it's certainly not the most important one.
I will give these two gentlemen their proper introductions. We got Steve Helwagen in the middle there from 247 Sports Bucknuts, Tony Gerdeman from Buckeye Scoop, and yes, Lewis Papp, we take no prisoners here. We're going to knock them dead. Here we go. Wayne, others, we always appreciate your encouragement. Thank you so much for all that you guys do. Of course, leave your comments, your questions, anything that you've got for us in the live chat. Otherwise, we're going to just run through what this could look like on Saturday and what it most importantly means. So for me, guys, when I'm looking at quarterbacks throw the ball around, I don't know that we can necessarily determine, okay, who's fulfilling a role of leader or who commands the offense, those sorts of things. But in terms of who's throwing on time, who's accurate, who's throwing velocity when there needs to be velocity, who's showing touch, who's just got the skills to throw the football, that would be number one to me in terms of these quarterbacks. It's just a skills competition to a certain extent.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, they grade every play, every throw, and they will come up with who they feel has performed the best in spring practice. I think a lot of it's command of the offense. It is a thick playbook, and I think that you have to, in some ways, accept and understand that there's a lot that goes into this, and it's more than just making a throw on time and getting the ball out. It's leading the offense. It's getting them in and out of bad plays, and it's moving the sticks. That's what it's all about, whether it's running or throwing, whatever it may be. And so, again, I don't worry too much about it. I think they've got 3 very good players there from what I could tell. The limited amount that I've seen looks to me like they've got 3 very good players. And I think that you just have to accept the fact that it's all going to come out in the wash. It's going to work out in the end. And that the guys need seasoning, and they need reps, and they need games, and they need throws, but they're going to get there. And I don't have much doubt about that. I think it's going to turn out to be just fine.
Yeah, I think there might be a correlation on Saturday. The best quarterback performance will be the guy with the best offensive line and who has the best time to actually look around and throw it. So I'm looking forward to it as well. Like, this is our first chance to see these guys throw the ball. CJ Stroud and Jack Miller have not thrown a ball in college football, and they didn't have a spring game last year. And we got to see them in one practice throw the football last spring. So I'm looking forward to just learning more about what they can do. And we've seen a little bit in spring, and they all look, as Steve said, very capable. Like, it seems strange to say, but I have other positions of concern on this team higher than quarterback, even though these guys have no experience. It's just, you assume, they're talented, and you assume Ryan Day is going to get them in a spot to produce. And then also right now there's depth. So if one guy can't do it, you give the other guy behind him a shot. And if somebody gets hurt, they have more options at quarterback this year than they did last year and the year before. Now, the one main option they had last year and the year before was way above anything else. But here, at least there's just more than one guy, and you're not like, oh gosh, what happens if somebody goes down like you were in the past?
After watching a few of these spring games, the one component that I wish they would institute is to take away this one-hand tap, at least make it two-hand tap or secure the court, something, because you see quarterbacks who are clearly eluding the tackler, the would-be tackler, the would-be toucher, and, there's a fingernail on a jersey sleeve and he's down. And it just doesn't really give you a, okay, well, we racked up 18 sacks today. Well, of course you did. It would have been 1.5 maybe, but because that's what you're seeing, and you're seeing guys that aren't even close to being brought down or even have a shot. And I don't know that there's a perfect way to regulate that. But again, it just doesn't give you a real clear to who's elusive, or just again, the ball could have been thrown downfield at no risk to the quarterback, but he was brought down for a 7-yard sack.
Yeah, you raise a good point. It's like they call it football, but it's not necessarily tackle football, because there's going to be a quick whistle, probably even with the running backs and the wide receivers. There's probably going to be a quick whistle. And, there'll be people who are frustrated by that. But again, they're not playing for your entertainment. They're playing for their development. And not only that, you can't win the national championship on April the 17th or whatever day it is, but you could certainly lose one if the wrong guy goes down with a broken foot or a broken ankle or a broken leg and he's out for the entire fall season. You can definitely lose one on April 17th. So I think if you told, Ben and Becky Buckeye fan in Bexley that the trade-off is we're going to keep everybody safe and have everybody available in the fall, they'll say, oh, yeah, that's right. There's a whole season, possibly 15 games in the fall. We forgot about that. I just wanted to watch football on April 17th, rock 'em, sock 'em, knock 'em to the ground. I don't know. Whole thing's ridiculous. Just get it over with. And, a lot of dust will be kicked up on Saturday and not a lot of it meaningful. I'll just say that.
Well, and Ryan Day said, well, I'll figure out later in this week if we want to tackle in the first half. And I guarantee that's eventually going to become a no. So he said we'll see if they want to tackle in the first half, and then they'll go to thud in the second half, which is basically your two-hand touch. But I'm guessing there's going to be no tackling in the first half either. And the quarterbacks won't be live. I think he already said that this spring, that there's no way they're going to have any live quarterbacks other than, maybe, well, they wouldn't even have a scout team yet. So don't expect anything. And this is an opportunity for a defensive end like Zach Harrison or Jack Sawyer to pick up a bunch of sacks, or Darian Henry Young, one of these young guys, because it's just, if you get in the vicinity, they're going to blow the whistle, and then you just add that to the box score.
Yeah, I think Steve had a lot of good things to say, and I'm right there with you, Steve. I think it's basically watching quarterbacks throw the ball and watching wide receivers and DBs match up. And can the DBs stay with what could be the best wide receiver core in the nation, considering the issues that they had last year? I'm going to be locked in on that. The line play, and especially as it pertains to the running game, is pretty insignificant.
Well, the other thing is you've got an offensive line that may be split up, completely. And Thayer Munford may play 2 series. Nick Petit-Frere was out when we saw him on Monday, so they said he'd be back, but he may not play much. So you're going to have just a mix of all kinds, and they've got a lot of guys, but they're not going to have their ones out there for very long. And Harry Miller's not playing, and so. Yeah, it's hard to run behind those guys. It's hard to pass protect. And so you have to take that into account as well. And then also some of these receivers are going to be going against walk-ons, and it's fun, but you also have to put everything into context. Like, why was he able to do this so well? So it's because there was a redshirt freshman who doesn't play rushing the passer, and there was a walk-on corner who was defending the pass, but more information is better than none, and we've got about none coming up to this point.
Okay. For anybody out there that's suddenly not as enthusiastic about the spring game coming up on Saturday, let me lift your spirits by letting you know that we've got a watch party on Patreon for the big spring game. But kind of a wrinkle here is that in our vote total that we took on Patreon, there was a close vote between Miami and Ohio State. Miami kicks off at 11, Ohio State at noon, so we're having a combined Miami, Ohio State watch party. So
Nice.
people out there can watch whichever team they want to. I'll be trying to watch both games, and we'll have our little watch party on Patreon. So you can join us on Patreon for the watch party. And then I'm going to go live right after the spring quote unquote games to talk about what we saw. So there we go. And then during the breaks, I'll be showing clips of the 2003 national championship game. We'll do that. No.
This was a turning point late in the third quarter where note on this punt return that an Ohio State player is going to get completely depleted.
Yeah. And here's a hold on Chris Gamble as he's trying to break to the outside and then here you can see him clearly get his feet in on this reception.
If they call this play good inbounds, the game is basically over in regulation play. And no one ever knows the name of Terry Porter.
How do you guys know which play I would have gone to first? All right.
101 shows, Mark.
That's exactly right. All right. We were probably going to pick these positions off one by one, but people are asking about linebacker or making comments or criticisms about linebacker, not necessarily starting with the Rod Farva here. Hearing about anyone standing out at the linebacker position. Again, I don't know how much we're going to be able to gain from Saturday, but set us up there, Tony.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. We talked about linebackers in the last week where you're not hearing about the Sams and things like that. And remember, Dallas Gant is out, and I wonder how much running is even going on. Yeah, as Dalton Moore, Cody Simon is a young guy who we've heard his name. Craig Young as well, but he's playing more safety than linebacker as that bullet right now. So it is a concern. Taraji Mitchell, this is his fourth year. You assume he's going to be fine. We've heard good things about him. He's always been a matter of getting the playbook and everything down, being in the right spot at the right time for the right reasons, as opposed to getting there and practice at the right time but for the wrong reasons. And so he's coming around. Tommy Eichenberg has done well. We saw Reed Carrico with an interception on Monday as the last play of practice we were allowed to see, intercepting Kyle McCord. So I think one of the reasons you're not hearing a lot is because there's not a lot of linebackers there right now. Also, Mitchell Melton getting hurt has diminished that a little bit. So, I wonder how much is the lack of numbers, lack of names. Are they playing a bunch more nickel? We've seen some 3-3-5 nickel packages out there in some of the clips. So I think, honestly, I don't know what to think in terms of why is anybody standing out other than the fact that things are still being kept close to the vest, and there's probably more throwing than running going on right now because the quarterbacks need that more than the running backs and the offensive line do.
Yeah, I'm keeping a good thought about the linebacker spot. I think Gant is going to be in the middle when he gets back in the fall, and then they'll find whoever fits what they want to do scheme wise to play the outside spots, whether it's one outside linebacker or two or however it's going to go, if it's going to be a hybrid safety or whatever it may be, or a nickel back and go from there. So again, I don't worry about the details too much. I don't worry about the names or the details. I think that it'll be much better defense than we saw last season. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And yet I don't have a lot of answers for anybody in terms of exactly who's going to man what spot and what scheme is going to look like. And I would tend to doubt you're going to get much of an indication about that on Saturday. My guess is they try and keep everything with a base vanilla defense with maybe some rules that they'll be allowed to blitz on 3rd and long or something like that, or something along those lines, and just try and keep it simple, organized and simple, I think is probably the order of the day, as opposed to exotic and experimental. So they do a lot of that, I would presume, behind closed doors, and I'm not going to show a whole lot of that in a nationally televised scrimmage. So I would think that that they're going to keep it fairly simple. And even then, I do believe there's going to be a degree of improvement defensively across the board. Linebacker is a huge question mark. I will grant you that. But, I see Rod's comment. The linebackers may be a liability the next 2 or 3 years until the 2022 guys are ready. And we had a chance, to see those guys, some of them at the Under Armour camp this past weekend with Gabe Powers and CJ Hicks and Dasan McCullough. And very impressive just standing there. And you would think you can't wait to get them in uniform, but at earliest that's going to happen is for at least for games is the fall of 2022. So you got to make do with the guys you got right now. And I agree with what Tony said. I heard some good things about Cody Simon. He's on his way as an up and comer. And same thing about Eichenberg. I think he's on his way up. And again, just keep a good thought, I guess. Let's see how they look on Saturday, and we'll see, who's really developing and making that move to be ready to participate in the fall.
Somewhat taking us off of the spring game, in addition to the latest in the cryptocurrency markets in the live chat, we've got some comments made about Justin Fields not necessarily having a stellar second pro day. Do we know anything about that? I hadn't heard anything.
All I know is he's done throwing, because the only thing I know that from is I put it on NFL Network, and they said that he's completed his throws, whatever it was. I thought he did pretty well the first go round, but apparently there's some things NFL scouts still wanted to see. So he went back out there today. No idea who he was throwing to. If Wilson and Olave did it again, they were supposed to practice today. So makes you wonder if those guys came back after practice to help, Fields make some throws or whatever. But again, this thing with Mortensen coming out and saying that his baseball may have screwed up his delivery or something. He hasn't played baseball in 3 years. And, people are just, I don't know. It's either people are joking that it's Bill Belichick trying to muddy the waters on the guy so that he'll drop to where he's picking, or maybe these are legitimate concerns. I don't know. I can't believe that they are, but he's going to – I don't know. I'm in this mood today where it's going to work out. It's going to be fine. He's going to be able to buy and sell all of us here in about 6 weeks. So I don't worry about Justin Fields. He's going to land somewhere good. And in the first half of the first round, somewhere, he's going to have an opportunity to go in and win the job. And you hope to be surrounded by good people. I mean, that's obviously not what happened with Joe Burrow this past year. But again, I'm optimistic that wherever Fields ends up, he'll be surrounded by good enough people to make him shine as well.
Yeah, I think once this all settles, and it'll be like Scooby-Doo, they'll pull the mask off the guy, and it's going to be Bill Belichick who is behind it all. And he would have gotten away with it too if it weren't for
those darn kids,
those meddling kids.
Yeah, but we weren't invited to any Zooms or anything today for the pro day, so it doesn't exist to me basically. And I've seen enough from Justin Fields to know that if somebody passes on him, they're making a mistake. And it is interesting that I have heard, me personally, nobody breaking down or discussing Trevor Lawrence's game, or the just the way, or Zach Wilson or Mac Jones, just tearing them down, and not necessarily tearing them down, but criticizing them the way that Justin Fields has been criticized. And I will also say that criticizing Justin Fields is good for ratings, because, in the same vein, 90% of what is being said about Justin Fields is that he's great. He should be the number 2 quarterback. He should be the number 3 quarterback. That doesn't get the movement. And the reason you see something on Mike Greenberg's show every morning about Justin Fields is because they can talk about the criticism of him, because you've got one person saying something and then everybody else going, this is crazy. How can you say that? But yet the next day somebody else says something, and it's just this, we're all living on the same hamster wheel basically as stuff gets churned. And tomorrow it'll be Justin Fields is, his vision isn't quite that good and he needs glasses and who knows what, and he's one leg is longer than the other, and so that's why he, his footwork is messed up. And meanwhile, Mac Jones is out there doing who knows what, and it's totally fine, because why? Who knows? So it's interesting, and I agree with you guys. I think he's going to end up just fine. And maybe with a little chip on his shoulder based on all of the stuff that he's had to go through. But as Ryan Day has said, like, none of that stuff bothers him. Like, he's just out there throwing, and I don't know what he did today. I haven't been watching ESPN, but I don't think like, does this cancel out his first one? No, not for me. Maybe for Chris Mortensen and the guys talking to those guys. Who knows?
Yeah, I can't imagine that after that first performance on Pro Day that he's suddenly become Gary Apremian in the Super Bowl, the ball flipping out of his hand. So exactly. I just
he threw 6 helicopter passes today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, Chip Minnick may have what has become the most important of the decisions that need to be come to a result here is the correct pronunciation of Luke Whippler or Weipler's last name.
Personally, I'm going back to Whippler. I know I said Weipler last week because that's what Ohio State said. I've always said Whippler, and then Ohio State was like, "Yeah, we'll get it figured out. We'll go ask him, personally how he says it," but we haven't heard back. And his name is not in the pronunciation guide from 2020. So, like, you got a whole bunch of other guys, but they don't have him. So, I think as this show, I think we're all agreed Whippler until we're told differently, right, Steve?
That's right, Whippler. That's what I'm going with.
Was Justin Fields in the pronunciation guide?
Fields.
Okay. Very nice. I'm also looking at the much anticipated, recently released ESPN Football Power Index. I think Ohio State's placed better than they have been at other times. Was it just last season that they were 13th going into the season, or was that the season before? It doesn't much matter. They were one of the 2 or 3 best teams in the country the last 2 years, and they started out at 13th. They're at number 5, and the record looks like it's supposed to be 10.8 versus 1.9 losses. That might be difficult to achieve.
1.9. Well,
2 losses for the Buckeyes, Steve.
Yeah, I saw, with the quarterback, a new quarterback, that is possible. I mean, it is entirely possible that there'd be mistakes and lead to losses. And, they're playing some decent enough teams. I mean, Oregon, has a good enough team. The game's in Columbus, though, so it would be a surprise if Oregon was to pull that off. I think you look at Ohio State and we kind of get stuck in this thing where, I mean, what has it been for the last several years? They've only had 1 loss every year, at least in the regular season. And so, I mean, when was the last time they had 2 regular season losses? I don't even know.
17.
17 perhaps, with Oklahoma and a Big Ten loss. Yeah.
Iowa.
Yeah, so that's the only time back to 2011 maybe. So I don't know. I guess it could happen. I don't feel or sense that there's a lot of teams out there capable of beating this team. I just for whatever reason, and for one thing or another, there, as I was going through the Big Ten, a lot of teams have a lot of starters returning, but that's kind of a good and bad thing. I mean, are they starters coming back from a team that went 8-2, or are they starters coming back from a team that went 2-4? I don't know. It's kind of cuts both ways, but the talent on the Ohio State team is at such a level that I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's unlikely to screw it up. I don't know. That's just my first blush at this whole thing. And I know that there were a lot of people lampooning the FPI that like Iowa State would be favored in a game over Ohio State, and I don't know, some different anomalies that came out as part of the FPI. But and that Cincinnati is nowhere in the top 25. That seems kind of a head scratcher as well, when everybody's got them in the top 10. So I don't know.
And of course, it was a coincidence that you said just a random team would be 2-4, coming back with a number of starters.
Yeah, I mean, I just thrown a number out there.
Yeah, 2-4.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at this list, and what jumps out to me, my goodness, Mississippi State is the 8th best team in the country. I don't think they've been the 8th best team in the country in the history of the program in 120 years.
There was that one year where Ole Miss and Mississippi State both got to like 7-0, and then they both finished like 8-4 or something.
Yeah.
So yeah, and one of them was on the cover of Sports Illustrated for that 1 week, and then
so were the Cleveland Indians in 1987 during spring training.
Corey Snyder and
they lost 101.
Super Joe.
Well, that was after
Andy
Super
Allenson.
Joe Charbonneau. Yeah, Joe Carter.
Joe Carter.
Joe
Super
Carter.
Joe
Yes.
Carter and Corey Snyder. Yeah.
But the FPI was a couple of years ago where they had Penn State and Michigan both higher than Ohio State in terms of the playoffs. I think they had like Ohio State was like a 1.8% chance to make the playoffs or something, like 8% chance to win the Big Ten. And it's like, have you ever watched college football? And have you seen what Ohio State has done over the last decade? And have you seen Penn State and Michigan? Michigan's last Big Ten title was 2004. Maybe they're not the best team to bet on this sort of thing right now or expect too much. But, hey, I don't have a football percentage index, so who am I to speak?
Tony, I'm almost positive, that was going into 2019. No Urban Meyer, transition at coach to Ryan Day. Lost your quarterback, Dwayne Haskins, transition to Justin Fields. And if you've got a formula that puts so much emphasis on the changing of the coach and the changing of the quarterback, which I get on the surface, but can we actually apply context to the numbers to say, okay, you automatically just, if you lose a coach, then your program's doomed. And if you lose your quarterback, your program's doomed. And when you really absorb those numbers that you just pointed out, a less than 2% chance to make the playoffs, Ohio State. And I think the Big Ten championship number was like 7%. Like if they actually could play 100 football seasons, Ohio State would only win 7 Big Ten championships. Seriously.
Yeah, they need a chase.
Be a 0 after that 7.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. And so I always go back to that, but it's, I think it's too early for that because we're still talking about spring football. We need the FPI stuff to be released in like May. Let us. We need stuff pieced out to us May, June, July. That way we've got something to talk about each month. Like Phil Steele's magazine comes out, in July, and the magazines, and then you've got different seasons, and but it's here, so we could talk about it, and we can. Will it change next week? Will next week updates be made?
And for you folks who are a bit bothered by the wins and loss totals not totaling 12, I think the factor is the possibility of going to the conference championship game. Because if you go down the list of the teams that have no shot of making a conference championship game, they add up to 12 even. But for those teams that, so basically Ohio State's got like a 70 or 80% chance, I guess, of making the conference championship game. That's why the wins and the losses add up past 12. Well, I'm referencing the site there.
So Michigan's
closer to 98.
Michigan's does add up to 12 then, is that correct?
It should. If it doesn't, I can't guarantee that. Cannot guarantee that at all. David Greenshield's on the line and asking about running back distribution. So here's my initial thought, then I'll turn it over to the experts, that if you don't want to cause a buzz, if you just want to get guys reps, and again, the running game being what the running game is going to be during the spring game, where they're going to run at 5 yards and somebody's going to come within a step and they're going to stop and they're going to hold them up kind of thing, then why shake things up? Even if you think Master Teague hasn't really looked good and these new kids look great, and even if that's the thought, why shake anything up by not just giving the distribution evenly? Or there's no reason to tip your hand in regards to what you're planning, even if they know at this point, and I'm sure they don't, because there's a lot of August camp left to be played.
I'm going to say I was very optimistic watching Maya Williams take the first team reps the other day when I was there. Master Teague was not available to do that. He was warming up and everything, but for whatever reason didn't go through a lot of the drills or whatever, or the 11-on-11 or 7-on-7 or whatever it was. And so that tells me he's next in line. And then Steele Chambers, Marcus Crowley are right there. And the two freshmen, Evan Pryor and Travion Henderson. I would look for a lot of those five. I would not look for a lot of Master Teague in this game. I would look for the other five to split time and maybe be divided between the two teams, 3 on one team, 2 on the other, and split the reps up like that, and get those guys each maybe 8 or 10 carries, maybe 15. I don't know. It seems like an awful lot. There's not going to be a lot of plays run in this game. I don't think they're really. I mean, they want to get as many in and get everybody work, but they also want to get it over with and move on to the whatever's after the game. So, I think it'll be neat to see even a snapshot who can break tackles, who can break through the line of scrimmage, who can make guys in the second level miss, who can rip off that 20 or 30 yarder, who can take the 15 yarder and make it a 60 yarder, that kind of thing. Also pass protection. If you see somebody getting trucked in pass protection or whipping in pass protection, turning down somebody in pass protection, just saying, I'm not blocking him, then that person's probably going to go down to the bottom of the list, because that's part and parcel of what they need these guys to do. And catching balls out of the backfield is one more thing. Master Teague really, we saw in the Alabama game, he just doesn't really have that flexibility to turn that torso to get back around and make those catches like J.K. Dobbins did, and Sermon to a degree was a pretty good pass catcher too. So I am interested to see if they utilize any of that type of passing game in this game, with the quarterbacks dumping it off to the running backs and what they can create on the perimeter as well. So, again, I think there's a ton of stuff, a lot of great stuff that we're going to get to watch out of the running backs.
Yeah, Teague does have at times, Tony, that look of a rock'em sock'em robot, kind of like as Steve was. It's just kind of like all straight up and down and side to side.
Like Batman, when he can't turn his head, he has to turn his entire body, type of thing. I always get excited to see the running backs. Then the spring game happens and they don't run the ball and they don't run it well, and so then you're like, So I don't I expect the depth chart for me, like Master Teague is number one, but the ones in this game may not get much time. And then, as Steve said, Mayan Williams is number 2. And then I'm going to say Marcus Crowley, but these guys are all going to be split up. So I think we'll get a chance to see all of them, all 6 of them. And for, at least a quarter apiece, or not Master Teague maybe, but, we'll get a good look. But I keep going back to Maurice Claret in 2002 had 5 carries for 17 yards in the spring game. So, don't get too excited about what happens unless they look really good. You don't need to see Travion Henderson long to know he's really good. But if stuff gets shut down, remember, this is not the offensive line. They're going against a good Ohio State defensive line, and it's not made necessarily for the running backs to succeed. So if they do succeed, that means even more to me. And maybe that's one of the more important things in this game. If they can make that first guy miss and then get into the second level, then that's significant for me. Yeah.
Florida State went with the format of not playing a game and just playing offense versus defense. And I actually think that's not necessarily more valid, but it's easier to make it more valid, because then you can keep the offensive line together for one thing. That's the unit that needs to play together. So it doesn't make a game fair when you say, okay, well, let's keep the offensive line together. So you got all the starters on one side. But that's the group above any other group to me that needs to play together. So I would make that a priority.
Well, and sometimes they will keep the first offensive line together in the way they do set the teams up. Like under Jim Tressel, the players would draft, so these guys would all get split up. But the week before the spring game is the Jersey scrimmage under Jim Tressel, and that's when it would be like offense versus defense, because that's when the offense and the defense play for the Scarlet jerseys. And so that was always the game to see. That was always the Saturday you wanted to be invited for that, rather than the spring game. But here, I wouldn't be shocked if the number one offensive line, as much as can be is together. But again, Thayer Munford's not going to play long. You don't have Harry Miller. Matt Jones may not even be with the ones at that point because of Luke Whippler. And so even if they do put the ones together, we don't really know what the ones are right now, and they won't be there for long. But yeah, I agree. They've done that in the past where it's this group of ones versus that group of ones. So they have tried to keep the offensive line together in recent years, as far as my recollection recalls.
Yeah, they don't. I think the coaches just assign the team. Somebody asked, are they going to do a draft and all that? I think the coaches at this point for this coaching staff just assign the teams. And you'll see some guys probably even lining up at times for both teams, or playing a half on one team and a half on the other, or whatever, to balance things out, or as they script things, who's going to play with what team. In terms of the offensive line, they have like 15 scholarship offensive linemen. I filled out a 3 deep with a couple walk-ons mixed in there. I think one on the second team and maybe 1 or 2 on the third team, because a couple guys are banged up, like we mentioned with Harry Miller. Nicholas Petit-Frere was out there the other day, and DeJuan Jones was repping at right tackle. So I think that there's plenty of offensive linemen, plenty of wide receivers. There's depth at almost every position across the board when you factor in the walk-ons, that you can split the roster down the middle and have, say, 50 guys on one side and 50 guys on the other, and play a representative kind of football game. They don't do a lot in the realm of special teams. There's no kickoffs or anybody running down there to get injured on special teams. But I look at it that, again, it's a showcase for younger guys who've never played in the stadium, never played in front of, there'll be 20,000 people there, that many people. Just kind of a showcase for those younger guys is how I kind of view the whole thing. And, guys who played a lot of reps will see some FaceTime at the beginning, and then kind of go to the sideline and put the ball cap on and sit over there and clown around. So that's kind of how it usually goes.
Christ Savior 888. Thank you so much for the super chat contribution there. May God bless this channel in Jesus' name. Well, I will take blessings over this channel any day, all day. So thank you so much for that, Christ Savior 888. All right. And in an unrelated note, we've got an 80th birthday for Mr. Pete Rose. Man, he's 80.
Hard to believe. I would lay in bed. The Reds are playing San Francisco Giants today here at 3:45, and when I was a kid, I'd lay in bed at 10 o'clock at night, and they'd be out playing on the West Coast, and lay there till 1 in the morning and listen to Pete Rose and Rose, Griffey, Morgan, Foster, Bench, Perez, Concepcion, Geronimo. I mean, that was the machine, man.
That's right.
So, yeah. That's memories from my childhood, mid-'70s.
I had a 1976 like baseball. I forget what the cover of it was called, but it was my first dive into baseball, and I just remember, that was the prime of the Big Red Machine. So that all-star team in the National League side was basically the Big Red Machine. It was just all the guys that you just mentioned right there. Tony, what was growing up? What was your and is it? As you progress through life, your sports priorities in regards to football, baseball, basketball, college, and pro?
Growing up, baseball was number one, and Little League and Pony League was everything. And then it became basketball, and then eventually, even as a fan, like I much preferred Ohio State basketball because they were better in 1990 than the football team was. But as a doing stuff my own, I loved baseball. Talking about Pete Rose, I wore 14 in Little League because of Pete Rose, and then sometimes I would wear 5 the next year because of George Brett. And so, yeah, those are I still have some of the baseball cards basically. So, but yeah, then eventually it becomes basketball and Michael Jordan and the NBA and college basketball and Jimmy Jackson, and that's Dennis Hopson was like my first favorite college basketball player ever. But then, college football just becomes this thing, and it just as it grew, I grew more of a fan of it. And now it dwarfs everything for me. And a lot of that is because I'm working on Sundays watching Michigan, so I don't necessarily see the NFL or pay attention to it. Plus, I'm a Bears fan, so I don't really I don't have a team to root for. So that kind of hurts. And the Cubs now being blacked out all the time, that's frustrating as well. And I don't even get me started on how blackouts are a thing right now when they're not even allowed to sell places out. But so that's my sports fandom story.
Yeah, I go both ends of the spectrum with George Brett, because when I was first a baseball fan, before the Indians took my heart, as they should have been, because I was only 45 minutes away from Cleveland, but I was a Yankees fan. They captivated me. Reggie Jackson, Mickey Rivers, Lou Piniella, Thurman Munson, all those guys. And George Brett was just a Yankee killer in the playoffs, and he hit a couple of home runs that was a dagger through my heart. But then about 10 years later, 1990, a buddy of mine and I went up to Cleveland Stadium. There was an added game to the schedule. It was one of those, the season was supposed to be over on Sunday. It was over on Sunday. They added a game because it had playoff implications, not for the Indians, for the Royals. And that they added a game, and for $1, we got in for $1, and we got a hot dog, a drink, and a popcorn for $1. And we had great seats. There were only like 500 people there. And George Brett actually won the batting title on that day. He was like in second place by percentage points and had like a 3-for-5 day. Boom, won the batting title. And I just thought that was cool.
He became the first and maybe is still the only guy to win a batting title in 3 different decades.
Yes.
Which is one of my favorite stats.
Exactly.
But I grew up a Cubs fan because my T-ball team was the Cubs, and that's where all of my Chicago fandom came, just because that's what I was assigned to. I could have been a Padres fan, who knows? And boy, what a life that would have been.
It was a national craze when George Brett was chasing 400 in 1980. Like, there were daily updates prominent in the newspapers all across the country.
Finished with the 390, I believe.
Yes, 390. The last player in generations to knock in more runs than games played, 118 to 117 that season. Yeah. All right. I guess we're still talking some college football, and you guys have a couple more minutes. If we've got anything else from the folks in the gallery here. Yeah, Yakov 22 brings up the Michigan quote unquote spring game, of which I said, if nobody sees it, did it actually happen? Kind of like the tree that falls in the woods. And we only got a report that Cade McNamara looked amazing, but nobody was at the game. So his mom was there, so she confirmed that.
He looked amazing.
If a tree falls in the forest and no one's there to hear it.
Did Michigan beat it?
Yeah.
But
if Michigan fields a football team, will they not win the Big Ten championship again for the umpteenth straight year since 2004? Yes.
We talked about this on my podcast today. Like, why isn't the spring game important to Michigan? And my theory is because they can't compete with Ohio State, the importance of it to Ohio State. And so we know how these two programs are compared. And so that's one thing that they just rather not be part of that discussion because they know they can't compete with it. This year they could have because of the limited attendance, but then also Jim Harbaugh is just weird. But even before Jim Harbaugh, it was just an odd, like the spring game just isn't at what it could be at Michigan. And I don't know why, other than what I just said.
I just can't let this slide because it's my show and my channel. I'll just say this because anytime the comment is made, tree falls in the forest, it brings me back to a comment that I made when I worked back at the Worldwide Leader. And there was an issue during a WNBA game, one of these situations at my former employer, that the next day, heads are rolling, people are running around crazy. And if it happened with the NFL or the NBA, then people would really go nuts. But it was a WNBA game, and I'm in some meeting that had been lasting for 2 hours. And at some point I said, if a tree falls in the forest, does it, and that wasn't received too kindly because
No.
the rating might have been like a 0.7 on that game. So, all right, good stuff, guys. We appreciate you stopping by. Hopefully, you'll be able to get in because your credentials are still kind of hanging in the balance right now for this spring game.
Yeah, you're going to be on your best behavior.
Stadium takes up like 10 square miles, but it's impossible to get, more than 5 people in there.
You might be hoping that, yes. I was going to make a comment when you talked about, Steve, it being nationally televised. These spring games become somewhat bearable / entertaining based on the broadcast production and the ability of the networks. And I will praise ESPN for doing this. And I think the other channels, I think the Big Ten network has fallen in line with this, figuring out a few years ago that this is not a football game. Don't broadcast it like a football game. It used to be like play-by-play analysis, like they're broadcasting a football game. Now they make it a TV show because it should be a TV show to make it more interesting. Get on the field, talk to the coaches, talk to players, talk about the narratives of the team, the storylines that concerning the program and this particular team. Don't call it like a game. It's not a game.
Yeah.
Mark, you want to know what makes people angry is when it would be broadcast locally and not on Big Ten Network or anything like that. And the one year there was a food drive associated with it. So you bring in a can of food, you get a free ticket. And so they would spend time during the game, like interviewing people at the food drive, and people are just like, I need to watch football. And you're just showing me what's going on outside of the stadium. So while I agree, TV show is fine, don't forget there's a football inside the stadium going on, and charity drive is fine as well. But let's not combine the two necessarily for a show.
Yeah, yes. For Rod and George, it's noon on Big Ten Network live, and as they said, they'll be showing some football, but also doing interviews and probably talking to some NFL Buckeyes on the sideline and screwing around. So, it's half grab ass and half football. That's just what you get on April the 17th. And it'll probably be replayed 18 times over the next 3 weeks as well.
Well, don't get me wrong, Tony. I want a TV show, but I want to see every play of the game, and I want it to be about football. Mm-hmm. I want a football TV show.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, no doubt.
Good stuff. Steve Helwagen, 247 Sports Bucknuts. We appreciate Steve. He's joined us for years and years and years, as has Tony from Buckeye Scoop. So please join their respective sites because they just, again, deliver it like nobody else. Guys, we appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the spring game, whether that be there at the game or watching with the rest of us at the Big Ten Network or on our big watch party, Ohio State / Miami. You talk about creativity. You only get that type of experience here at the Voice of College Football. Okay, we will see you guys next week.
All right, take care.
Thanks.